One thing that's really new that we just started recently is a clinic where transgender people can come in and access hormones. A lot of transgender people going from male to female will use male to female will use estrogen. People who are going female to male will use testosterone to aid in the transition. You know, like most Americans, a lot of transgender people don't have insurance, and even if you do have insurance, most insurance companies will not cover transition-related medical needs. So, and it's very difficult to find places to get hormones. A lot of people will resort to street economy, black market hormones. It's very dangerous. So one thing that we just recently started providing at the center is a clinic where people can come in, see a doctor, also get their primary health care needs checked into, as well as get a prescription from a qualified doctor for hormones.
So we've had this sweeping healthcare overhaul that's just been signed into law. What does that mean for the transgender community? Are there any kinds of parts of that healthcare overhaul that the transgender community was really looking forward to having changed?
Well, I think the battle still needs to be figured out a little bit, because most insurance companies, or a large portion of insurance providers, will specifically exclude trans or transitional needs. So they will specifically say that if you are transgender, we will not cover any of your needs. So that's where the battle is right now, that, okay, great, now we all have insurance, but let's make sure it's inclusive insurance of what we need.
Yeah, and at one time in the state of California, and this happens all over, insurance companies would just flat out refuse to insure you if you were transgender, and they'd look at it as a pre-existing condition. And in the state of California a few years ago, I believe a statute was enacted stating that insurance companies could not deny coverage to somebody simply because they were transgender. And I think now with the health care reform, that's going to be true in all states, that simply being transgender does not exclude you from any type of insurance coverage.
So the American Psychiatric Association, their DSM, which is under public comment period right now, it really dictates what healthcare providers and insurance companies are allowed to do as far as treatment goes for the transgender community. What do you think would need to happen in order for trans people to get all of these services that they need without any kind of hassle, without having to go to a one-stop shop, and just to be able to go to any provider they want?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, one, the reason I think that gender identity disorder remains in the DSM is because insurance companies need a code, a psychiatric, some type of diagnosis in order to code and bill for services rendered. Really, it could be the American Psychiatric Association has created a stigma around gender identity issues rather than look at it as this is a medical issue and this is something I need to address. It has to be cast in the shadow of doubt. You know, oh wait, you know, you have a mental issue, you know, we're going to help you with that. And I think that insurance companies are going to be less likely to extend services to somebody based on something as questionable as a mental disorder versus something that could be presented as a medical issue, a medical necessity.
So you have children who are, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old who are saying, you know, this isn't me. What would you say to people who are that young, who are saying that they're having these dilemmas?
I think it's important for parents to let the child self-identify until they get to a point, probably in their puberty, when they can decide for themselves, okay, this is the route I definitely want to take, and we'll continue with hormone therapy to continue in that route. You know, I think a good example of this is the intersex community. In the past, it was, you know, oftentimes doctors would decide that if it's an intersex child and their genitalia is ambiguous, they would often just make a vagina because that's easier to construct than a penis. And oftentimes children would grow up and still not feel comfortable in their bodies and would oftentimes switch or not identify as female or the gender they were assigned at birth. So now the intersex community is really advising parents to let the child self-identify until they can get to a point in their life when they've decided, okay, I want to either be fully male or fully female or androgynous for the rest of my life. And so it's really important to let people self-identify.
So take me through what would happen if a parent were to come to your center bringing their child in. Where would they start? What would be the process that they would go through?
Probably getting connected to a therapist to start talking with the child and sort of feeling out where they're at. There's a lot of some really great youth programs, particularly Children's Hospital has an adolescence medicine program that deals with trans youth. So getting them to facilities like that have a lot of information, a lot of different knowledge that they can bring to the parents so that they can better facilitate that child's needs as they continue to evolve. I think that's really the starting point.
I think there's also support groups too for parents of children who are identifying in gender variant in some way, one way or another. I think that's really important to have a peer support group, because I think that it can present a lot of pressure on a parent if their child, say they've had this little boy who wants to wear a dress to school, you know, and has to run the risk of being beat up, having administrators or teachers who are unempathetic or uneducated on the issue. What do other family members think? You know, there's a whole host of issues that parents have to deal with. So I think that, one, talking to other individuals who've been through that experience, and two, accessing resources. There's literature out there to help individuals get through that.
So the Anti-Violence Project and the Economic Empowerment Project both work in concert at the center. Can you tell me, Jake, just about one person who you've dealt with who has come in with a lot of issues and how you've been able to help them?
Oh gosh, sure. I've had clients who, and this is really a very typical scenario, a client who is a male to female transgender person, so identifying as a woman, living life as a woman, attacked on the street, severely beaten, simply for being who she is, has come into our facility, not insured, doesn't speak English very well, immigrant from Latin America who escaped to come here because she probably murdered in her country of origin. We've been able to assist folks with getting a reimbursement for medical expenses through the state of California's Victims of Crime Compensation Office, helping report to police, and then keeping in touch with investigators, making sure that the case is being followed up on, going to court, being moral support, helping them navigate the system, providing translation, just taking them through the whole process up until the point to where somebody is convicted. At the same time, they can access services through the Transgender Economic Empowerment Project. A lot of folks are still in need of jobs, especially if they're transgender. So we'll work together with individuals oftentimes.
I would say oftentimes how it works is that people come to me to report that they've been discriminated at work, and then they go to the Anti-Violence Project for further assistance with that.
Sure, with discrimination issues, we will talk to folks and set them up with attorneys. We do have attorney referral services and other resources to see if there is actually possibly a case for litigation. We'll also talk to folks. Drian strategizes with folks maybe to try and avoid those situations.
You know, that's wonderful. That's unfortunately all the time we have for today. I wanted to thank my guests for joining me today.
Thank you.
My name is Jason Rose. This is On Point. Jake, you are a transgendered man. How did you make that decision?
Wow, it was a lot of soul searching. Spent some time talking to individuals, meeting other people who were female to male transgender, researching all the effects of testosterone and research about surgeries, really being very thoughtful and making a plan and a process for it. I think what really helped is that there are other transgender men available for me to look to for mentoring and to ask questions, because really there have been no role models for us.